Welcome everybody to Vital Moments. My name is Ron. I'm the lead pastor here at Vitalpoint Church, and I today get to host Vital Moments. Normally it's David hosting, and so the pressure's on, and I am excited to be able to be on this side of the conversation. And I know that David's excited about this too. David, welcome. It's good to have you. You're the site leader in Exeter. You're on the teaching team. You're the community connections pastor, director, pastor. You do a lot. Oh, and you oversee Alpha across all sites. What else you want to do?
You're out of the gates humming here today.
I am.
You're like excited for today.
Well, and I feel like I've got to bring the energy because you had a bit of a chaotic morning with your family and the girls, and it's been a big weekend.
Chaotic. It was a mixture of things. Probably, in all honesty, more on my end, not on their end. So, but that's just reality of life right now for me.
Dad struggle Monday morning. Well, It's interesting because people don't understand this. When you preach on a Sunday, and we get the double whammy around here. I mean, we record on Thursday, and then you live with the insecurities of the talk for a few days, and then you get to do it again live. And
you're like, shoot, I should never have said that.
Yep. I do that almost every week for our recordings for our sites and for online. And then, but people don't know is that Monday morning is often very difficult for the pastor that's taught that Sunday, and because you really work through a lot of, why did I say that? Why did I do this? Because you have these in the moments, but we trust that God can even use a donkey to speak, so He can use us.
What are you calling me?
We won't say, because we'll just leave it at that.
You should be the host every week. If you're going to be buzzing like this, you should be the host every week, and we should have other people on here instead of me.
Well, the good thing is I've been here at the office for a while, so good stuff. Good. So we wrapped up Fearless. I was in Clinton, and thankfully John finally got it right up there. Fearless. It's not fearless, fearless, because we've been talking about this idea from Gideon's life that we are given an assignment by God. Often it can be in the everyday moments where we step into the good that we're created for in Christ, and then also the reality of sometimes we have these bigger kingdom assignments, but fear keeps us from stepping into those. And it's not about removing fear completely. It's about fear having less of a hold on us. And yesterday, man, great talk. You gave clarity to where we wanted to land. So why don't you give everybody a bit of a snippet of the talk?
Yeah, it was a great series. Let's say that right off the hop. Like, I had a young guy yesterday come to me through his mom. He was talking to his mom, and then his mom chatted with me, and he was just like, I can't live fearless. Like, there's no way in this world. And it really sparked this great conversation of, fear is in this world, but we don't want it to be the driving force. So the story of Gideon over the last few weeks has just been, I think, earth-shattering for some people to see that fear can still be in your life, but there's this understanding that God doesn't want it to control your life, right? And so many of us allow it to control our lives. And we looked at Judges chapter 6, a really interesting moment, verses 25 to 27, where Gideon and God are face to face. And it's like this moment, it's this turning point in his life where he realizes this is actually God. He's had like 4 moments before that God's revealed himself that we saw over the series. And it's this pivotal moment where he's actually starting to internalize that God sees him like this, wants him to move like this, and not allow fear to cripple him. So he starts to embrace really God's story and pathway for his life to win the battle against the Midianites. But this moment that we read from verses 25 to 27 is this really spicy moment where God says, okay, you're finally realizing who I am and how I've called you to live and who you are in me, because I've designed you, I've created you, and I have a plan for your life. And he tells him to go tear down the altar of Baal and the Asherah pole, which is basically false god worship
Yeah.
that God's people were doing. In Judges chapter 6, it says at the beginning, they were doing evil in the sight of God. And God's like, Gideon, before you do any of this, before you move in anything that I call you to, you are to tear down these false god altars and worship poles. And the idea of this whole conversation was to look specifically at how when you understand the presence of God and the pronouncement of who he says you are, your kingdom assignment, when we walk in obedience and trust that it's God working through us, it's not our outcome. We actually become a conduit of God. So then the glory of God is revealed to the world. And to the areas around us that in which we live in. Not, hey, look at me.
One of the thoughts I just had, Dave, I love how you use conduit. I often think about a garden hose, right? So the water flows through a garden hose. Like God's grace, God's goodness, God's presence flows through our lives like that garden hose. But fear puts a kink in the garden hose.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? So when you want to move the sprinkler, you put a kink in it, and then you can move the sprinkler and then kind of unkink it. I don't know if that's a word or not. Unkink it. And then the water flows again. I think over time, fear reduces the ability to, because we're not walking in obedience, right? So
I even like the image of the kink of the hose, though, because sometimes the kink in the hose, you still get a dribble out. So there's still like this, like you still have these moments where, and maybe that's like Gideon's like 3-4 moments before he actually finally undoes the kink, right?
Yeah.
He notices God, but then when it actually gets unkinked, he says in verse 22, he says, "Alas, oh God, this is you. I have seen you face to face."
Yeah. That's right after he makes the meal and it's consumed, right?
Yeah.
Then he, because up until that point, he didn't even know who he was talking to, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is something that you wanted people to know from this part of the story where he tears down the Asherah pole, burns the bulls? What do you want people to take from that?
I really want us to understand that through the story of Gideon, he had to remove these things so that he could actually walk into the fulfillment of what God wanted him to do. That many of us may have something in the way of our life right now that is not allowing God to fully move. Like we are hindering. Obviously God can do whatever he wants, but we can hinder the kingdom work in our lives by having something in the way of God, right? We get the pleasure of sitting in coffee shops with people or in our offices, and we've even said these things in our own personal walk with Jesus, like, I don't feel God, I don't hear him, I'm not sensing him. And as I was studying through this week and chatting with you and some other people, it's like sometimes we forget, or maybe we haven't even realized that we've got a false god or an idol that is in place of God, like that's actually at the throne of our lives. And it's hindering our ability to actually notice God, and it's actually allowing us to question the existence of God. And through the story of Gideon removing the Asherah pole, taking down the altar, and then God says, "You're going to build another altar, and it's actually going to be for me.
Yeah.
And you're going to give a sacrifice on that."
On top of the stronghold.
On top of the stronghold, right? It's just like, talk about like a flex, right? That God's like, yeah, in Exodus 20, I said, "There shall be no other gods before me." You're actually going to place the altar for me on top of the one that used to be there. To the false god.
And the stronghold was what God's people built to keep them safe from the Midianites, right? And we've been talking you and I've been talking a lot about what does it look like to break down the strongholds in our lives that we have created to keep our lives comfortable, to keep our lives at ease, and I think the strongholds are the things that, I was thinking about Netflix, because sometimes I get binge watching a show or something like that. Netflix can become that show that it's a stronghold, like it's a stronghold in our lives to block everything out, right?
Yeah, it
Or
creates comfortability and safety, right? You're like on
right,
your couch. You're like, don't have to think about other things that are
yeah,
going on at work or within your marriage or if you're dating,
yeah,
finances. It's these things that I got this image of, it's the things that just numb us.
yeah, yeah. It's why people do addictive patterns and behaviors: alcohol, drugs,
Mhm.
porn. Right? It's creating strongholds in our lives.
So it's key for us that I felt like we had to talk about, what does modern day idolatry worship look like, right? Like there's things in our lives. Yeah, I joked around. We may not have an altar of Baal or an Asherah
Okay.
pole in our backyard.
People in Clinton laughed like
Okay,
from the
good.
video. It was great.
Like none of us have that, but there are forms of modern day idolatry, right? In our lives, the formal kind, seeking powers of spiritual forces, and the secular forms of idol worship.
Mm.
And if you get a chance to pick up John Thompson's book, Perseverance, he talks about these things. Because we as Christians and as human beings may be doing these things in our lives and have no idea the power that it has over our life, because we think, oh, like if I just sprinkle this or I sprinkle that, I should be fine. But what ends up happening is, as you add more things to your life, they become your false god. They become
Yeah.
your sense of security. They become that stronghold that you think is protecting you,
Right.
but it's really not.
Yeah.
And it's tough, and it's
Yeah.
hard to
So
get.
people, you wanted people really to. I mean, there was moments. It was just like, wow. Like I was in Clinton yesterday doing a site visit, and then I obviously visited your site as well on the way home. You could hear a pin drop. Like it was, especially when you got to that moment where you're like, search me, oh God. Like, what is in my life?
Yeah.
What patterns, behaviors that I have in my life that are hindering my ability? What patterns, behaviors that are increasing fear that God wants me to get rid of in order to walk in obedience? And I think even for young adults, like I'm going to go somewhere on this that I've been thinking about. I've not talked to you about this. I was thinking about young adults that are believers that date unbelievers.
Gotta go there, eh?
Well, it was interesting because I think about a young adult desiring to follow Jesus, but they're in relationship with someone who's not a follower of Jesus. And especially if there's not a warmth towards Jesus in that other person. And I was thinking about this yesterday when you were, I was actually in the talk. I was thinking about this as an example of something that can hinder our ability to be obedient. Is this person becomes, this weird, but it becomes that idol, right? Well, I love this person. I'm intimate with this person. Maybe one day they'll follow Jesus, right? It's like, no, it's outside of God's design. But anyway, that was just my pondering. We can leave that alone for now. People will chew on that probably.
We're just gonna let that one sit.
Yeah.
Not talk about it, eh?
No, I mean, maybe it's for another time.
No,
Maybe
but it's the reality though, Dad. Like,
yeah,
it's the small things that we think that aren't gonna have an influence on our life that can turn into a massive stumbling block.
Yeah.
Right? This week I had to do it myself. Psalm 139, verse 23.
Yeah.
Search me, O God, know my heart. And what I found was, as I did that, as I quieted myself before God, is he revealed to me that I had started to use the things from God.
Yeah.
The things that are good, the things that are rich and beautiful. And I started to use the things that he gave me as self-worship. Look what I can do. Started to use my talents and my abilities. And I had to be very clear, like, it's not like I'm sitting behind the scenes trying to figure it all out, right? But
we would call you out on it.
I hope so.
We would. We would.
That's good. But it was the reality check of, we have so many great things in our lives. And when they are good, sometimes they just climb the rank and then they even nudge God out.
Yeah, because that's what an idol does, is it replaces the worship of God, right?
Right.
Right.
And God had to
man.
say to Gideon, before you step in and get the victory that I've already spoken over you, your kingdom assignment that you're going to walk in, the glory that you're going to show the Midianites of who I am, you need to tear down the things that are hindering my people of actually seeing me and glorifying me before anything.
Are you okay if I add to your talk?
Yeah, you're the lead pastor. You go for it, man.
Well, I was pondering this morning. I shared this with you off camera.
Yeah.
There's a piece of me, David, that wonders if the tearing down of the Asherah pole and the altar to God needed to happen before the big show, before the ultimate battle of 300 people against, what was it, 135,000 Midianites or something like that?
Yeah.
I believe that Gideon needed a small victory in order to gain the confidence to step into the big show.
Yeah,
right.
that's
beautiful. I say big show. I mean, the big moment. You know what I'm talking about. I call it that. That's not what it is. But I believe that he needed proof that God was with him to step into that moment. B, I think it was a piece of God asking him to do this to actually show him how he saw him, mighty man of valor. That even though he did it at night, I love that you drew that out. It was like he went at night. There's still elements of fear, which proves this, David. Think about this. How do I say this right? You cannot wait for fear to be gone to take your first steps of obedience.
Yeah.
Right?
You can't.
You can't. You've got to take those steps in order to overcome the fear. Fear limits our ability to trust, but Gideon, in the small moment, which we could probably say it's not a small moment, pulling that altar down, he needed that victory in order to know who he was, who God was, and claim the promise of God, so that when it was whittled down to 300 men to go to battle against Midian, that he had the confidence to step into that moment.
Yeah.
Like, that is so amazing.
And what does that all do? His kingdom assignment pointed to the one that created him.
Reveals God.
It reveals God.
Yeah.
And I'm sensing that as many more people start stepping into their kingdom assignments, because we've heard the stories behind the scenes, right? And we saw on Sundays a few Sundays ago where people said, hey, these are the words I'm feeling that God's speaking over me. As more people allow the fear to take the back seat, probably in the trunk, let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah.
But in our faith obedience to God and taking steps in that fear, we're saying, okay, God, you've spoken this over me. It's going to reveal him, and people are going to be able to have conversation or moments at hockey rinks or dance studios or mowing the lawn or neighborhood parties and say, like, I've had a moment where God has transformed everything inside of me.
Yeah.
And people will be able to say, okay, we've noticed something different.
Yeah. And when you take a group of people that are learning to walk in obedience, it reveals more of God's presence.
And let me say this, okay? Community Connections pastor, get a question all the time from Connect Group leaders. Why can't I do Bible studies on my own that I want to choose?
Oh.
Okay.
You get that question?
We get that question. I shouldn't say all the time, but when we first started really getting in this rhythm of what we're doing with Connect Group Leader Discussion Guides, it is in ways more powerful having hundreds of people talking about the same thing and then walking in that conversation and topic throughout their life. And then the ripple effect, because as we're seeing in small towns with our kingdom assignment, we're seeing so much more connection between, I got family in Forest, I got family over in Grand Bend, I got family in Strathroy, and it's just like, if we're all living this out and not doing separate things, they're all going to get a taste as it all connects of what's going on and what God's doing through Vitalpoint.
Yeah.
And that to me is so powerful.
And it's our responsibility as leadership to bring discipleship to the body called Vitalpoint Church, which is multiple locations in small towns. And it's our responsibility to guide people in that process out of Sunday mornings for an understanding of how to live this out. If we've got random groups all over the place doing different things, we're not all moving in this. I believe this is one of the things that continues to unify the church. Now we're going to go down a bunny trail for a second. We got to be done because Josh, the producer, is telling us to be done. Is the strength of that.
Yeah.
And the support and the discipleship that we can bring to the leaders that bring it to their groups to focus on the discussion. And when it gets off track to complaining or griping or whatever, like it's a tendency. We all do it. You and I grumble and complain about things too. But it brings us back to what we're trying to do across like hundreds and hundreds of people being able to, and one day maybe thousands if God so chooses, that will be growing in their discipleship.
I'm amazed by how our Connect groups do not grumble and complain. I'm amazed by that. Let's say that, right?
But that was not by any stretch. Yeah, you're exactly right. 100%. Yeah.
But it's just this reminder for us as leaders or people listening to the conversations. Okay, what's the point of this? It's first for yourself to follow God.
Yeah.
And then how do you live this out missionally
in relationships?
Yeah.
Just so fun. Anyway, dude, we got to wrap this up. Great talk. Great series. I've contemplated a couple times, man, maybe should have done a little longer series. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We got a series planning meeting coming up. I'm really excited about this, what God's doing. Going into a prayer month, February prayer month. We're going to be learning and listening and how to talk to God, how to listen to God, how to be in community. We got a prayer event at all of our locations, with the exception of Forest. We're not there yet. We'll be,
not yet.
Yeah, we will be doing that in the future. David, thanks for wrapping up the series. Thanks everybody for watching, listening. If you're not connected to a Connect group, I can't tell you enough. It's so key and so important. And thanks for listening, watching. Hit the like button, subscribe button, do whatever you need to do. Leave a comment. We're excited at how God is using these conversations to impact people's lives. Peace and grace, and have a great week.